bought some of these foam brushes recently to varnish an oil painting with, and I've got a couple left over, so I thought it'd be quite a fun thing to see if I could make a watercolour with them. I've never used them before, but I thought it'd be interesting anyway, bit of an experiment, just see what happens. I'm going to use this rag paper. It's handmade Indian paper, quite high texture. It's quite temperamental paper actually, but I've got a sheet just lying around, so get some quite interesting effects with it, so I thought we'd give that a go as well. I'm just going to sketch out a very basic outline of like a bit of a pond. I'm thinking somewhere along the lines of something Edward Wesson might have done. So just have a bit of a tree there, large tree there on the left. Very simple sketch, just to map out roughly where everything's going to be. So I think I'll wet the paper all over, as I usually do, just with the mop brush. Not too wet, just sort of just slightly dampen it, just allow the paint to move about. Now, like I said, I've never used these foam brushes before for watercolour anyway. I mean, I usually just use them to varnish oil paintings. Quite nice to use them for that. You don't get any streaks in the varnish, but like I said, I had a couple left over, so I thought might as well have a little bit of an experiment. I'm guessing somewhere along the line, somewhere in between painting with a brush and a sponge really, so might get some interesting little things happening on the paper. So just grab some blue, some raw sienna, some alizarin crimson, and just mix that up just in the palette ready. And I just wet the brush and just squeeze most of the water out of it, and I'll just put in a very simple little sky. Now, a lot of the paint is actually just soaked in to the foam, but it is giving some of it up, so it is working. This actually feels quite similar to painting with the hake brush in a way, just not as wet. So I just get a bit more water in the brush there and just pull that paint around a little bit. You should get a very soft sky, and just reflect some of that down into the water area. I'll just use the brush again just to pick up some raw sienna and just mix it with some of the palette grey that's there already. Now just treat this as just kind of like a first wash. So just getting a little bit of colour into the land. And keeping it very simple. I'll just pick up some blue and some alizarin crimson. And a touch more cobalt into that just to get it on the bluer side. So it's kind of like a warm blue-grey now. And I'll just touch in just a suggestion of a little bit of distance. That's come out quite grey actually, so a little bit more cobalt into there. And very simply just suggest a little bit of distance there. That should all soften as it dries. Okay, I'll dry that off. That's the first wash done. Now it's dried completely, so I'm just going to wet it all over again just very lightly with a mist bottle. And now just mix up kind of like an olive green, just with some raw sienna, cobalt blue. And just put in some very simple little tree shapes. And like I said a minute ago, actually it's kind of reminded me using these brushes very similar to using a hake brush, but just without the amount of water. So if you struggle with water with the hakes, then maybe give this a go. It might be worth a try. It's always good to experiment anyway and use new tools. And I always think anything that makes an interesting mark is a valid tool for painting. Don't always have to just stick to brushes. And so I just mixed up kind of like a warm brown now. That's just some blue, raw sienna, touch of burnt sienna. And I'll just start putting in that large tree on the left. And just make it a little bit lighter at the top, and I'll have it darker towards the base. So some ultramarine, raw sienna again. Kind of like a deep olive green now. And just bring that down to the little bit of land in the foreground there. And I'll just cut round that negative painting. I'm getting quite dark now, so there's some blue and some burnt sienna. And I'll just touch that in at the base of the trees. And just a little bit of a waterline there. It's actually got quite a nice chisel edge, this foam brush, so it's very handy for straight lines. And a little bit of dark in the bottom of that tree there on the left as well. And I'll just bring the water line up on the left there and just kind of make connections between everything. And just grab some more raw sienna and just suggest maybe it's a few grasses or something in the foreground there. And just leave some of the paper behind underneath, just for a bit of an impression. Maybe there's some light catching it. And there's just a few more little shrubs. And the whole time I'm kind of using the brush, moving it around, using the point, using the corners, using it side on. Can mix up a little bit of a blue, and then add that with what's in the palette. And I'm just going to suggest a few reflections. And so bring it straight down. Actually, it seems to be working better if I use horizontal strokes, so I'll just bring it across. And just vary that colour slightly. And just reflect that tree on the right hand side there. and then just leaving behind some of the dry paper underneath. That kind of acts as to suggest a few little ripples or a bit of movement on the water. And a little bit more blue. And I just had a suggestion of just like a reflection of the riverbank there. Okay, I'll dry that off, I think, and then I'll add a few finishing touches. So now I'm just going to switch to the rigger brush now, just for a little bit of detail. And so I'll just mix up some dark with some ultramarine, burnt sienna. And I'll just fill the brush with paint and just strengthen that little riverbank there, just a touch. And now just suggest a few tree branches and trunks. And it's nice to have a few hard edges, a little tiny little bit of detail, just tie everything together. Now very loose, just looking for little gaps and places I can run a branch through. And I just add some dark at the bottom of that tree. Again, just kind of cutting around the foreground. Just leave a few areas of light behind. I don't want to do too much of this, but I will just add a little bit of dark just on the left hand side of the far bank, and I think I'll just put another little tree in there. And just a few kind of like dark shadowy areas, and just not stick a little fence in there, why not? And again, just looking for little areas I can run a branch through. Maybe it's like a little ivy covered tree there. And again, it's just adding a few darks, a few hard edges, just to tie everything together, and just add a little bit of darkness to the bank. And I'll just flick up a few little grasses just in the foreground there. Nothing much really. And now I've got to add a little reflection just for that tree there. And I'll reflect that fence down just very simply. And also some of those branches and trunks there. Again, keeping it very simple, just a few little touches just to suggest what it is. I always think if you can try and say as much as possible with the fewest amount of brush strokes, always makes for a better painting. Now that other tree I just added there looks a little bit bare, so I'll just add just a suggestion of a little bit of foliage, maybe like a few sort of half dead leaves on it or something like that. Okay, I think that's the finished picture. Well, I've taken the tape off and dried it, and actually overall I'm quite impressed with that. I'm quite happy with those foam brushes. It's very sort of interesting to use different tools and seeing what marks you can make and what effects you can get. and I think a little bit of practice with that, I'll be able to sort of come up with some really nice pictures. So have a go yourself if you've got anything like that lying around, and let me know how you get on. Or are there any other sort of things you use in place of brushes? You can let us know down in the comments. Now, if you don't already, then follow me over on Patreon, and there's a nice little community over there. You can ask me any questions, and you can request videos and send me photos and whatnot. So check that out. And I'll be back again next week with another video. So until then, have a good week. Happy painting, and I'll see you then. Bye for now.